Hey team, let's talk Senate bean soup. Um, some of you guys uh, for this soup have a variation where you might have received pinto beans instead of navy beans. Um, I have navy beans right here, which is the true um, ingredient for Senate bean soup. It's called Senate bean soup because this soup has been served in the dining room at the Senate floor um, for the last, I believe, like 20, 25 years. They serve this soup every day. This is a beautiful bean soup. I made this soup a little bit different than what your recipe calls for. I'm trying to save you some steps here. Okay. So what I did was I soaked my beans overnight. Um, Once they were ready to go, I rinsed them. I discarded anything that was floating. Okay. And then I put them in this pot at low heat with my brodo. Okay, included with the brodo, I put my bay leaf, that was from my sachet, and a couple of cloves of garlic. Okay, I also threw in some thyme. I just happen to have thyme here, so I just put it in there, and then the ham hock. Okay, and I cooked this for about, I think it was like 45 minutes to an hour. And what we're looking for is tenderness on the beans. Okay, we don't obviously we don't want to boil them. We want to simmer them and let them cook slowly so they don't fall apart. When you look at these beans, I'm gonna try to get a close up for you. But when you look at these beans, they're still whole and not broken apart. Right? They're not mush, but they're creamy in the inside. There's no graininess to them. Um, but this will save you from making a sachet, or it'll also save you from the simmering time that your recipe calls for. I believe it's like step 3 or step 4. It's just um, basically the recipe tells you to cook the beans so they're almost done, and then drain them, and then come back and cook them some more. I cooked my beans all the way. They're ready to go. Um, and I cook them with the sachet in there and the ham hock, and also make sure to remember to not put any salt in there or your beans won't get soft. Okay, but so that's the beginning part of Senate bean soup, right? The rest of this will go fairly quickly. This is a puree soup. The idea behind a puree soup is that either some or all the soup is pureed in some kind. Um, Not all puree soups have cream, and this is the perfect example of it. Um, for this recipe, we are, other than the ingredients are in the beans, we're going to use um, carrot, onion, and celery. I did not measure it. What I did was I had a half an onion left, so I cut that. I had 2 carrots left, so I cut that. And this is the rest of the celery that I had in my kit. Um, I also have a couple of, I think there's 3 cloves of garlic that are sliced right here. And I noticed that my ham hock didn't have much meat, so I decided that for making this soup, I diced some ham and I sliced some salami, and I'll put that in here as well. Okay, so if you have your beans cooked and ready, and you have all your other ingredients ready, um, the first thing we need to do is if you look at step 3, it says that we need to drain the soups or drain the beans and keep them separately. If you do that, your beans will dry out. Anything that you cook in a wet cooking method, you need to cool down in liquid. Okay, and even though these are not going to cool down, we want to maintain them in liquid because we're going to use them right away. Okay, so I'm going to take my beans, and I have another pan right here, and I'm going to bring them over. Now, why am I doing that? Because we want to continue building flavor in this pot. If you look at your recipe, it says that you should continue in the same pot. So when you do this part, do not wash the pot. Just simply drain it into another container and put this pot back on the fire so we can get rid of whatever water we have here. And while that's happening, I'm going to remove the hock and the thyme and the garlic off of my beans and we'll let this pot dry so we can add oil in here and it won't pop on us. Just removing this real quick. Don't throw your ham hock away. Whatever lean meat you have on your ham hock, feel free to cut it and use it again in your soup. Okay, I just happen to know that mine didn't have much meat, so I decided to go for the ham and the salami. Okay, you can, if you don't want to put it in there, you don't have to, because the flavor of the ham hock is already infused into the broth and the beans. Okay, now my pot is dry. I have it over medium heat. I'm gonna add a little bit of canola oil in there. I'm gonna wait for this to heat up a little bit. And from this spot on, this soup doesn't take a long time, okay? We have our oil heated. I have my mirepoix. I'm going to add it all at the same time. I don't necessarily need a certain order here. The idea is that we're going to sweat these vegetables and then introduce the beans back in here, okay? I'm sure this might come up. If you don't have ham, but you have some bacon, and you want to use that for this soup, go ahead and render the bacon before you put the vegetables right on this spot, and then you can bring the veggies back, okay? And overlooking here is for translucent, okay? I'm going to go ahead and season my mirepoix. And this won't only just make it taste good, but it will also help the water release of the onions and the carrots and the celery, okay? This soup is supposed to have some texture, so although I cut my vegetables very nicely, some of it is going to get pureed, okay? But the ones that are going to remain there, I want them to look as nice as possible. Now my onions are starting to turn translucent, so I'm going to take my garlic and place it in the pot. If you feel like you need a little bit more fat in there, feel free to add some. This step should take just a couple of minutes here while we get the garlic to start smelling good. Alright, my vegetables are sweated. They should still have some texture. My onions are clear. I can smell my garlic really good. And now it's time to add the beans back. That piece of garlic there, trying to squeeze by. Okay. Now your pot should look like this. If you feel like your stock reduced a little too much when you were adding the beans, you can go ahead and add more water or stock to it. I think know that the stock that you had in there just has reduced. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's concentrated in there. So, excuse me. So water won't hurt it. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to let this simmer for about 10 minutes. Alright team, our soup has been simmering for about 10 minutes. Should look like so. You can tell that the beans and the carrots and the celery are all still whole. It's a good time to start tasting this soup. We might need a little salt and pepper, but it shouldn't be too aggressive. Yep, we're gonna season with some pepper, a little bit of salt. Remember, those beans don't have any salt, so we want to make sure. And I always, anytime that I'm doing beans like that, and I'm trying the soup, or if it's just beans, I'm trying the beans. When I try them the second time, I usually just try the broth, but now that I've added the seasoning, I want to try it with the beans, a little bit of everything in there to make sure that the flavors are there. I'm gonna go a touch more salt. Okay, so at this point, this soup is done, or just about there, right? So feel free to turn off your soup. Okay, some of you might have a immersion blender or a stick blender, and some of you guys might have a regular blender. If you have a regular blender, I want you to take a third of this soup out and make sure that you mix it well, include beans and everything. Move a third out, and then you're going to blend half of that third, and then we're going to add it to the soup. Your recipe calls for blending half of the soup. I believe it's going to be too thick, so I want you to do it a little bit at a time. For those of you that have an immersion blender, this is all I do is I come in here and I sap it a couple of times, and the idea is to bring some texture to this soup so it's not all pureed. Just a little bit of it is pureed. Okay, now if I move it around, you will notice that your soup went from kind of being a broth soup to looking like almost like your cream soup. But this is a puree soup, okay? We just don't want to puree the whole thing, okay? So if you have a stick blender, this is lucky for you, because this is the best way to do this. Pulse it a couple more times. I'm calling it good, okay? Now we've pureed some of those beans, which it basically means that you might want to double check your seasoning, okay? Yeah, seasoning is good, texture is good. So we just have a final touch, and now I can grab my ham and put it in here, okay? And soups like this show the importance on knife cuts, because you can really see good knife cuts or bad knife cuts in soups like this. Guests that will eat this soup just have all the time in the world to look at it, and it says a lot about a chef when you're making this kind of soups, and you take your time and make really good knife cuts. Okay, I'm saving a little bit of the ham and the salami because I'm going to garnish the plate with it. But other than that, we can mix the ham and the salami into this soup. Like I said, usually what's in here is the remainders of your ham hock. Okay, so you don't have to have it in there. Soups like this were made to stretch out meat, or whatever the protein was. So they will make a bean soup and then they'll flavor it with a ham hock, which is a smoked piece of pork, which it will make you feel like you're eating a lot of meat, but you're really not. Okay. So, but now that this soup is seasoned, the soup is completed. I'm gonna move this out of the way. I'm going to move my soup out of the way, give this a quick wipe down. I have my bowl, my ladle. At this point, just like all the other soups that we've been working on, make sure you grab some solids first. Scrape your ladle, come to the middle of the pot, come to the middle of the plate, I meant. And I'm going to do that one more time. And then I'm going to come back with some liquid. Alright, at this point this soup is pretty much ready. I'm going to mix my salami and my ham, and I'm going to put a pile right in the center on the top of this, like so. And here's our puree soup. Senate bean soup with salmon, halal, and salami. There you go.